Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. If today you hear God's voice, harden not your hearts. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the 70 disciples, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the deeds of power done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. But at the judgment, it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted into heaven? No, you will be brought down to Hades. Whoever listens to you listens to me, and whoever rejects you rejects me, and whoever rejects me rejects the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you. There's no doubt that all of today's readings are a little bit challenging, I would say. We heard in the psalm, "How long, O Lord, will you be angry forever? Will your jealous wrath burn like fire?" So that's in the psalm. And in the gospel today, of course, these woes to the cities of Chorazin and Bethsaida and Capernaum. And these were towns actually that Jesus did a lot of healings and miracles. But no one really paid attention. No one repented in those places. No one would acknowledge who Jesus was, even after doing all these things. There were very little conversions. And then we get to this first reading from today from the prophet Baruch. And Baruch actually was a contemporary of the prophet Jeremiah. And we don't read too often from the prophet Baruch in our lectionary. So basically it's like today and tomorrow. And one other time in the liturgical calendar. Actually a very important time in the liturgical calendar. The prophet Baruch is actually the 6th reading that can be read at the Easter Vigil. So there are a total of 7 readings at the Easter Vigil from the Old Testament. So he's the 6th one. And so one could say that he's very important in our tradition. He's been read basically from the start, to a point where he's read on the night of Easter, the night where the catechumens receive the sacrament of baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist for the first time. And so they become a new creation. They're converted to Christ. They say yes to following Jesus throughout their lives. And Baruch in this first reading today is basically saying that a lot of the calamities that have befallen on the people of God are in a sense a little bit self-inflicted, if you want. It's because of their disobedience that the calamities have been happening. Now, it might sound a little bit harsh, but when we think about it, there is some truth to that, I think, in our own lives sometimes. When we don't follow the commandments set out by the Lord, that's when we're susceptible to dangers. Now, the commandments are there to protect us. God's law is there to protect us, to help us along the way in our lives. He gives us laws for us to lead happy lives. And I think I've said this before, but the commandments are like the boundaries or the fence in like a playpen. You know what playpens are? Babies can play inside of a playpen, and they can play anywhere inside of the playpen and inside of those boundaries. But parents put that playpen up because they know that outside of those boundaries, there's hazards in the house. There's things we don't want the kids to put their fingers in and stuff like that. There's corners, sharp corners and things like this. We don't want them to bump their heads. And so that's why there's this boundary, this playpen, if you want. And it's the same when we go astray, when we leave the boundaries. We're susceptible to dangers of this world. And so that's why the commandments exist. And so I think that's how we can understand a little bit that first reading. And so I think the resounding theme in today's readings is that it is possible to reject God's plan. It's possible to reject God's will. It's possible to reject his commandments. God gives us free will because he loves us. He doesn't want to force himself upon us. So if he was forcing himself upon us, that wouldn't be actually love. Now, St. Augustine said, God created us without our consent, but he will not save us without our consent. God created us without our consent, but he will not save us without our consent. In other words, it's kind of like Father Bob Bedard's famous line, to give God permission. We have to give him permission. Father David would say that often, very much. But what's important today to remember is that even when we can reject God, he will always try to bring us back to himself. He wants to forgive us so much. He wants to forgive us so badly. He is, in a sense, passionately in love with us. That's what we're getting at with these readings today. That's what's coming out of the readings today. They seem a bit harsh, but it's God's passion. He wants us to come back to follow him. He wants us to continually turn our faces towards him, to continue on that road of conversion. That was actually the theme of last Sunday's readings, if you remember. Those two sons. One who said, yes, I'll do whatever you ask. And then he doesn't do it. He later rejects. And the other who says, well, no at first, but then ends up doing it, ends up doing the will of the Father. And to this, Jesus says, for this reason, the prostitutes and tax collectors will enter the kingdom of heaven first. So the takeaway for us today is that we cannot let our past sins and even our past rejections discourage us. Do you know the difference between a saint and a sinner? Often we think of a saint as someone who's just got it all put together, someone who's always perfect. No. A saint was actually a sinner who always got up quickly, who always gets back up quickly when they fall. Someone who gets back on their feet right away. So that's our calling as we continue our journey in this life on our way to the kingdom of heaven. Amen.